He wasn't focused on what if I freeze? What if I don't make the winning? He was focused on what he wanted. And it might sound so simple, Jason, but there's such power, and it's more about what are some of those challenges that athletes go through.
At the highest level, what I've really learned is that high performance is less about addition, far more about.
People think you got to do more, and it's like, it's not about more. It's about stepping into who you truly were meant to become. Is there such a thing of overly ambitious?
We grow into bigger bodies, but the story underneath the surface stays the same.
It's like your identity, right? Your identity is achieving, and who are you when you're not achieving success, when you're not, making that big thing happen.
The parents of elite athletes is that they have very high standards in terms of character, but they also create a very safe space in terms of psychology and in terms of their emotions. Like, you're allowed to fail here, you're allowed to have.
Welcome to Make Things Happen with Diana Pagano. I came from struggle, living life on survival mode, and later found myself living in that same vicious cycle. Life is meant to be so much more than settling. Are you ready to stop dreaming for what could be and turn those dreams into reality? I thought so. Well, get ready to live life on your terms. Hello and welcome to Make Things Happen podcast. I have a very awesome guest today, Jason Sousa, who is a performance coach and founder of Mental Edge Athletics, where he helps athletes and high performers overcome pressure, fear, and self-protection patterns that really block peak performance. I'm really excited about Jason. He's a former first-round professional soccer draft pick. Jason now teaches athletes, parents, and teams how to perform freely under pressure by understanding the deeper wiring behind confidence, anxiety, and human behavior. He works with many high-performing athletes, including 6 national champions. His work blends performance, psychology, and nervous system awareness and identity transformation to help people stop surviving and really tap into their full potential. I am so excited, Jason, to have you on here. I know that was a very long bio, and I'm sure there's so much more to learn about you. As I was telling you earlier, I'm a hockey mom to 2 very competitive hockey players. They're only 10 and 12, and the hockey world is crazy. But even being a former tennis player myself in high school, I do believe so much in our performance in any parts of our life, really, whether you're a performance coach for athletes or outside of that, transfers to any part of our life. So welcome to the Make Things Happen podcast.
I'm super excited to be here and big fan of yours. And it's great to talk to a parent, a sports parent, because we can certainly relate in terms of a lot of the topics. So I'm excited. It'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. So talk to me. When did you talk to me about your journey of becoming a performance coach, and how did that begin?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate out of college to be drafted to the professional level. As every athlete, that's the goal, right? And the dream to get to the big leagues. And so when I got there, a lot of things shifted for me and really hit a lot of roadblocks. And so that, unfortunately, that didn't last very long. And that became, my pain point. And I really wanted to understand what happened to me. I went back to school. I did my master's in sports education. I did my master's thesis in athletic development. I went to go get certified in mental performance, and then I had the opportunity to work with a lot of athletes. And so I figured it was really just, I was lacking some of the mental skills. And so I worked with a lot of athletes in terms of the mental skills, but for a lot of athletes who were very dedicated, very gifted, even with the mental skills, they were still struggling with pressure, which told me that there's layers deeper here. And, that just put me on a journey to really discover some of the deep truths about performance, which led me to here.
Absolutely. I love that you said there's so much deeper. It's not just positive thinking. I'm really big. Obviously, I have a book that I published, The More Mindset, in January. That was a great bestseller. But I do talk about mindset, and it's like a overused word sometimes. Oh, you got to think positive, have a positive mindset. What does that really mean, right? And so I love that you went deeper with unlayering what the root was and what are some of those challenges that athletes go through. Do you mostly coach athletes?
Mostly athletes. I also work with entrepreneurs as well.
Okay.
So, a lot of the same philosophy and methodology transfer over to any endeavor for someone who's looking to achieve. But the majority of my clients are high performing athletes.
Amazing. So talk to me about what is the one common denominator of that, I'm sure we can talk about here all day about all the different things that people in top athletes really struggle with. But what would you say is the one common denominator that you see often, even when they're very, and from a skill set perspective, are very, talented?
The biggest thing I see is that they're trying to overcompensate certain internal patterns by doing more, right? We always think more, I got to do more, maybe more discipline, maybe more effort. Can I build more confidence? But the bigger question is it's what's blocking you from being able to express what you already have. And so at the highest level, what I've really learned is that high performance is less about addition, far more about subtraction. And so it's really about removing what's blocking you from being able to fully express yourself. And that's really the common denominator.
I love that. Gosh, you just hit the nail. Like it's not about adding more, it's about subtracting what really is holding you back and doesn't serve us. And not to talk about the more mindset, but people think you got to do more. And it's like, it's not about more. It's about stepping into who you truly were meant to become. And when you have these limiting belief patterns that really affect your limiting belief at the end of the day, it really does dictate and ends up showing up for you in how you perform, whether an entrepreneur in your business, or a top athlete or whatever area you are in your life, right? And how do you work with people to overcome that?
For everyone, it's always different in terms of some of those protection patterns. And so it's really about understanding, where are you constrained and why. And, as you mentioned already, we a lot of the mindset industry, as you talk about the hype and the positive thinking, we teach athletes how to run faster with their chains, but we don't teach them how to, remove those chains that are actually blocking them. And so really understanding what are some of the patterns that you created, even from a younger place, in terms of, who you thought you had to be to stay safe. Because a lot of those patterns that allowed you to feel safe are the very patterns that are constraining you from performing now. And so really start to dive into some of those patterns, and that can look different for different people in terms of what they really fear underneath the surface and the limiting beliefs that they're holding on to. And so really diving in and understanding what are those protection patterns and bring it to the surface, because without awareness, we can't have change. And that's the first step.
Absolutely. I love that, you call it protection patterns. I never saw it that way. And there's so many things that we carry from childhood. Like I grew up very, I hate to say chaotic. My parents did the best they could. They were struggling entrepreneurs, but it was survival mode all the time. And I believe it's what drove me so much in my young adulthood to just be successful and survive. And yes, I did beat the odds in many ways. I still do. But a lot of that was fear that was driving my success. It wasn't because I had it all put together. It was because I was so fearful of growing up the way that I was. I was a single mom later in my 20s. And I remember just not wanting my kids to have the same experience. And you might say, okay, but you had a beautiful home. You were able to afford a nanny. I had all this stuff. But internally, I was so broken and, living from a previous wiring perspective, right? And so I love that you really touch on like what are those things, and would you say a lot of that comes from childhood or is something that people cultivate even throughout their life?
Certainly a lot of that is from childhood in terms of, the subconscious identity that we create. And I certainly relate a lot to what you said, and so until I could see it, I was very much stuck in the story that I have to be achieving to have, to maintain my sense of worth and to validate myself. And so, a lot of the athletes that I work with are stuck in that place. Like I have to achieve, I have to achieve. So, when you succeed in what you feel is relief, that's a pretty good indication that, that you're using fear as a motivator. And certainly a lot of that is really at a young age, even before we fully have language, we're already looking to maintain certain things, whether it's that belonging, that certainty, that connection, that worth. And we start to create these adaptations around our behavior, around who do I have to be to maintain that? And then we grow into bigger bodies, but the story underneath the surface stays the same.
It's like your identity, right? Your identity is achieving, and who are you when you're not achieving success, when you're not, making that big thing happen. Is there such a thing of overly ambitious?
It's a good question. You know, wow, that's a great question. I wouldn't say necessarily over ambitious. I would say, what is the driver to that ambition? And so is it from I need this to feel something about myself? Then I think that can be over ambition, where it's I want that because of the exploration and the growth that it's going to force onto me, and the excitement that it brings. For me, that's very different. And with a lot of my performers, it's, when they come to me, it's like, I have to win and I need to win. And it's, no, you don't. Okay. But
yeah.
if you want to, great, that's going to drive you forward. But the moment you start talking about have to and need to, what you've said is that the alternative is not okay. And if I experience the alternative, it means something about me. So I don't know if you can be over ambitious. I think it depends on what's the driving factor, but that's a great question.
Well, and that's a great answer, because you're talking about, well, what's the driver behind the ambition? Because if you're like, I have to win, I need to win, it's like, at what cost?
Hmm.
because I've been there at what cost, right? And I was spread, work to the bone and just I knew what my reasoning, the purpose, there's a driver, and there's nothing wrong with the drivers when they're in healthy fashions, not when they're, sacrificing your mental health, sacrificing your well-being and other things, right? And so I've always been very ambitious. So I'm actually talking about myself, like I've been told I was a little too ambitious and all this other stuff. And quite frankly, like for me, it's knowing, I guess, and this is what I write about in the book, but like for me, it's about not settling. And I feel that that does drive me for because of my past. I did feel that my parents were settling and they were hungry for success and we saw success sometimes, but more times than not, it was just, and listen, I'm not saying life isn't a roller coaster. You have your ups and downs. The economy is up, the economy's down. Like everybody has those challenges in life, but I truly believe it's how we show up to those challenges. Whether you're an athlete, I'm sure you've had many times that you're coaching people in their game. And let me tell you an example, Jason. When my kids, they call me, my husband says their mental coach, and I am. I'm their mental coach. I'll need to hire Jason later in life probably, but who knows, we are right there with our kids. And this is a great topic for parents that are listening now that have kids that are athletes, because a lot of times I've seen it all. I've seen crazy parents. I've seen myself get crazy at times. I'm like, wait a second, they're only 10. What am I doing? But just a segue for that. But when my kids want to do hockey, let me just tell you a quick story if I can. So when Anthony, he's my youngest, he's 10 and a half, and he wanted to do hockey at 5 years old. And my husband was not signing him up, wasn't signing him up. They were ruining my wood floors with these little hockey sticks. Somebody at a birthday party gave him this mini hockey stick. I don't even know. And my husband is a hockey fan. He watches, but wasn't a crazy hockey fan to where like, he was going crazy over it, but he always followed hockey his whole life. He played a little bit as a teenager, but nothing crazy. Anyways, and so I knew nothing about hockey, and I'm like, Anthony wants to play hockey. You have to sign him up. I'm a tennis player, and I'm very competitive. I'm like a wannabe Serena Williams. But so I told him sign him up for hockey, and so he says, "Do you have any idea the commitment? Do you have any idea the 5 o'clock in the morning?" I said, "What are you talking about? Whatever." And so, long story short, we signed him up, and now both of our boys play. And so I'm all about supporting, and I know you work with parents. I saw in your bio
Hmm.
when parents are pushing their kids, like Serena Williams' father, I heard, was pushing them to have the respect and they will be respected. And he had a driver, right? And so everybody has a reason behind their ambition or behind the reason they want to do X, Y, and Z. And so I truly believe the opposite, and whether I'm doing it right or wrong, is that we don't want to push our kids. We don't want to tell them you should do this, you should do that. I'm always like, do you want to do baseball? Do you want to do, tennis? Like, for it's up to me, they'd be a tennis player. But what is your opinion about parents that are pushing their kids, not necessarily to be great, because I think there's nothing wrong with like not pushing them, but showing them that, hey, if you want to be great, you got to do the work. Nothing's going to get handed to you. I love that side of it. But when it's being driven by the parent versus the child, because we are following my kids beating of their drum. The minute, if it ever happens at 12, at 14, that they're done with hockey, we'll be done with hockey. So I was just curious your take on that, being an athlete, performance coach.
Yeah, whenever the motivation is external, right? Like we're doing it because we're being pushed or we're trying to get validation or approval from others, that always has an expiry date. It always has an
Mm.
expiry date at some point versus the athlete having an internal motivation and that being completely intrinsically pushed. I'm a big believer that sports parents should push their kids specifically in terms of character and things that they can control. You're someone who shows up. You're someone who doesn't quit. You're someone who competes. You're someone that shows discipline, respect. You're someone who's coachable. We have
Mm.
very high standards. The one thing I've seen with elite, the parents of elite athletes, is that they have very high standards in terms of character, but they also create a very safe space in terms of psychology and in terms of their emotions. Like you're allowed to fail here, you're allowed to have setbacks, you're allowed to have those moments. That's all part of the journey, right?
Yes,
You're
yes.
allowed to have losses in terms of results, but you don't have losses in terms of character because that's within your control. And I think that's
I
really
love
the
that.
difference.
Oh, 100%. It's interesting when we had tryouts. So my kids, we just had hockey tryouts a couple months ago, and it's very competitive out here. I'm in Connecticut, and Anthony wanted to try out in Chesco. They both did. They're only a year apart, and they wanted to try out almost. I think they're almost like the top two in the country. And I'm never gonna knock it down. I'm gonna be like, listen. That's amazing. Good for you for wanting to compete on that level. And they are really good hockey players. I'm not just saying that. So I think that, they can hang with the elites. And so when they went there, my Anthony was very confident. He said, I can, I bet you I'm going to make it. My husband and I looked at each other like, whoa, that's great confidence. And I'm not trying to boost my own horn. Like, I think we have good kids. We show them the foundation of being a good human, right? And that, it's good to be competitive, but what's the journey about? And as long as you know that you gave it everything you had with hockey tryouts or just a game. So for anyone listening in that has kids, I like to tell my kids and tell me what you would add to that. Anybody listening that could help use some words of wisdom from Jason here is that I'm always like, I always say this, did you give it your best? Did you give it everything that you had? Did you leave anything on the ice? Because when you give it everything that you have, you could feel good. And yes, it sucks to lose, but I hate to say winning isn't everything. I think when you're competitive, you want to win. But like you said earlier, when you attach it, like I have to win, I need to win. It's like, no, I think it's about how the experience of a player, regardless of what they're playing, is that they do give it everything that they have. Because then you're not getting off and feeling crappy about yourself. If you feel crappy, it's because you had something more to give that you didn't really give it your best. And my son will come off sometimes. One of them said, I gave it like a 9.5. And I'm like, what prevented you from giving it a 10, And so I just love to kind of have these conversations, even though they're little. I think they're not too little to have these real conversations that, hey, it's not always about winning, or they didn't make it certain teams that they tried out for. I'm like, Michael Jordan got denied in high school, his high school basketball team. I always bring that up, or Tom Brady. I just bring up examples because it is about perspective. It's how you see the world, how you see the opportunity or the rejection, how you see it you attach a meaning behind it. And as you mentioned earlier, it affects your identity too, to that. So anything you would add to that? To
Yeah,
that?
no, you touched on a lot of things. I'm very big on perspective. We're not a victim of our situation. We're a victim of the way we're looking at our own situation, right? And as you said,
Mm.
nothing is good or bad until you give it meaning. For me, I'm really big on terms of coaching the person and not the performance. And I think that's where a lot of parents get it mixed up, because
Mm.
performance, there's a lot of factors there in terms of whether they're able to perform or not, but in terms of how they show up is always within their control. And so an example for me, you know this was probably last year, my oldest came off of a game, and this probably sounds different for a lot of sports parents, but he came off and I was like, hey, you didn't make enough mistakes out there, right? And he was
Oh,
kind
I
of
love that.
he was taken back, right? And I was like, the goal is not for you to avoid mistakes. The goal is for you to be brave, right? And that's what I'm looking for in terms of who you become. Be brave and try things and be bold, because that's for me, sports, we don't know what level our kids are going to get to in terms of the next level of sports, but all of them are going to move on to the next phase of life. And sports is such a wonderful vehicle for them to develop the character that's going to set them up for success. And so for me, that's far, far more important. I want to coach the person, not the performance, and allow that person eventually to find their own internal motivation to go on and play their sport. And as I tell all my athletes, like, go find out how great you can be in this sport,
Go
right?
find out.
Go find,
Absolutely.
like, that's a goal of mine. I want to find out. I want to be the number one performance coach in the world, and I'll probably never get there, but I love who it forces me to become, and the growth and the exploration. And for me, that's really exciting.
Why couldn't you get there?
Well, maybe I can. Yeah. I
I'm
just
just
need
kidding. Yes, yes.
I
I
just
love
need
that though.
I got to talk to the right people, which today is a great start.
Yes. You're a performance coach. I'm a mindset coach. Just kidding. We can coach each other. No, just kidding.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting with confidence, and I love asking, it's funny. I had Evan Carmichael on my podcast. He's
I
really
love it.
big into marketing. Okay. So one of the things he said, I always ask, like, what's a question you wish somebody asked you? It was I don't know. I had some cool questions. I've been told that I asked some good questions. I never really know what I'm going to ask, but sometimes I'll prepare. Sometimes I don't. And when I don't, I think that, oh my gosh, am I going to forget? But I'm just like, you know what? Divine timing, it's going to be great. And so I asked him that, and he said, I love when people ask me a question that they themselves want to know. And I'm like, well, I love that you said that, because that's how I do it. I always ask questions that I want to know. And so there's a lot of, entrepreneurs that listen to Make Things Happen podcasts, or just people in business, or whoever, that have kids in sports. And so I think that this is very relatable. But of course, if somebody is an athlete themselves and they stumbled across this podcast that happened for a reason, this is your sign that there's something in this episode that you have to pay attention to. But confidence, I want to talk about confidence, because whether you're 25, 35, or 11 or 12, I do feel that confidence you know, is a very top on the list. A confident player will usually get through the things, but doesn't mean that because you're confident, you're not going to stumble with some sort of pattern that needs to be changed, right? So I'm curious to know when somebody isn't going all in, there's something holding them back. And then you ask them and they're like, I don't really know what's holding me back. And so, but it's confidence.
Mhm.
Is there something a parent that's not an expert can do to really, I mean, I can tell you what I do, but I don't want to tell you that because I don't know if it's right or wrong. I'd rather hear from you. Like, what would you say that if there's a player that has skills, he has the skills, whatever sport, but that he can go all in. And if he did go all in, he would be dynamo, but there's something holding him back because
Yeah.
where it falls under confidence.
Yeah, and so my definition of confidence perhaps a little bit different than others, and I think we often say it's, confidence is being able to stack proof of what you're capable of, and I think that's true, but it's incomplete because at the deepest level, specifically when it comes to athletics, confidence is really a permission slip that your nervous system gives you to just fully express what you have. And the moment
Awesome.
that there's something internal that feels unsafe, your body starts to activate a protective state, and all of a sudden you start to feel the tension and the overthinking starts to kick in, and so it appears as though the athlete lacks confidence. And I have this conversation with parents all the time, like, I think my athlete lacks confidence. They'll say, well, put your kid on the ice with a bunch of friends, would their confidence show up? And like, yeah, like he just kills it. It's like, so the
Yes.
confidence is not missing. What happens is in that moment, they lose the access to the confidence that they have because the moment feels unsafe to a deeper identity that they haven't explored.
That was so beautifully said. We got to capture that with like captions on the screen. I love that. I love that you're going way deeper with confidence because I do believe there's levels, and maybe I'm saying the wrong word, of insecurities based on your environment. Because when I put my two boys on the ice with each other, they're very competitive. They're best friends, by the way, but they're very competitive, and you see the difference sometimes. But yeah, I think that makes sense. So sometimes, and hockey, they're young, but it's a physical sport. So whether someone's playing football, I don't know. I mean, you're going to play hockey or football. You got to have some endurance of taking a hit. Otherwise, you're not in the right sport, right? But the confidence piece is interesting that you said that. So how would you work with an athlete typically when there's something in their environment that is not giving them permission to really express themselves fully?
Yeah, it's to do a little bit of reverse engineering and finding out, what's triggering this response for you. What is the moment? For some that is, in front of big crowds. Well, okay, what did we fear in front of big crowds? Like, I don't want to be judged. Okay, well, let's dive a little bit deeper, right? And so, oftentimes, what we often think is our identity, parts of who we think is us is not really us. It's just, it's just ways that we've created these protection patterns to avoid feeling certain things, right? And so an example of that would be an athlete that I'm working with who, recently was just called up to his national team, and we're super excited. But when we first started working, he was afraid to be fully seen and afraid to make mistakes, and we had
Yes.
to explore that. And so we started to dive into his identity. What's his identity? Well, I'm a people pleaser, and I'm a perfectionist, and like, well, those are not really, strategies. Those are or standards. That's ways that we protect ourselves from something we don't want to experience. And to find out that he had a situation when he was younger, he came to a new school, language barrier, and he tried to
Mm.
introduce himself to some kids, and they said no, and they laughed at him. And from that moment on, he just started to create these patterns in terms of, I don't want to be seen. I'm going to be the quiet one. I'm just going to try to be agreeable so that people don't judge me. And then it shows up on the field, right? And so you start to do some reverse engineering. You want to get to the root of where did you what you felt was real, but the conclusion that you came up with is not true, but it's starting to dictate everything. And you want to
It,
find that root cause and really question it. Is this a truth here? And from there, instead of us managing the symptoms, we want to get to the root, which changes the sequence that they experience at the surface. That's the
wow,
deeper.
that's cool. I like that. So it's almost like the definition that you're giving it, right? Because or the meaning, I guess. You mentioned, is this reality? Is this the truth? Like I kind of say that with limiting beliefs. We all have them. The most, highest successful people out there have had or still have, thoughts that may not serve you. Like, will I be able to do this thing today? Is this going to work out? Is this going to come through? Am I going to win? Whatever it is, right? And I'm always like, challenge the thought. Is this the truth? Or is this an assumption that I'm making? And even research shows that, over 90% of our negative thoughts are actually false assumptions, right? that it actually ended up working out, that it was just us making a mountain out of nothing, right? Or maybe it's not nothing, but it's the definition, it's the meaning behind certain things that we give it, right? I think you kind of alluded to that earlier.
Yeah, no, and if you understand the brain, I mean, the brain's job is to predict and
Protect.
protect, and so it always predicts those worst case scenarios. But what it predicts is based usually on some of those protection patterns, right? Where we don't feel safe. Oh my goodness, I'm going to fail in front of people, and we start to look at those, and you can start to see it from a protective pattern, and start to question, is like, why? What does this think that it's protecting me from, and why? Okay, where am I unsafe in this situation? And from there, we can start to see some of those patterns. But yeah, I mean, as you said, nothing is good or bad until we give it meaning. But if you're in this biological state of I'm managing threats, it's very difficult to shift your mindset because you're trying to override biology with psychology, and that's where a lot of athletes struggle with the mental tools, is because their nervous system is reacting to a threat, and they're trying to use some of those mental tools to offset that, and it often doesn't work.
To offset it. Interesting. This is some deep stuff. I love it. So talk to me, just one thing that's on my mind, pressure, right? What do you do with an athlete that's like, hey, Jason, I need help, or like, this is a big win or loss for, it could go either way, and they're feeling the pressure. What would you say would be the top tools you give them, or I don't know, whatever you can share, that under a pressure situation where the stakes are high and it's a pressure situation, whether it's, a game that's, 2 minutes left of the game, or whatever we call pressure, right?
Yeah, there's a few different things too that come to mind. One is to understand, we feel more pressure when we overemphasize the importance of the moment and we focus on the uncertainty of it. And so, I often ask athletes, when you look back on some of the moments, and even in terms of going out to that stage or the book, it seems like, oh my God, like this has to be, this is so big. And if you look back today, it's like, it wasn't that big after all, right? And so
Right.
we overemphasize the importance. And so I tell athletes all the time, it's not a Disney movie. No one single moment is going to define your life.
Right.
And the second thing is, the moment we focus on the uncertainty, we're going to add a lot of pressure onto ourselves. What's going to happen? How am I going to perform? The answer to all those things is, I don't know, right?
Right.
Get comfortable with it. Like, I don't know is my favorite part of sports. That's why I watch it, right?
Yes, right. Not knowing what might happen.
Yeah, get excited about that, right? We always try to fear it. It's like, no, get excited about that. That means anything can happen. Try to shift your perspective from that place. And the other thing I ask them is beforehand, what are the things that you fear? What are the things you don't want to happen? And they'll list it out, like, I don't want all these things to happen. And I say, okay, and could those things happen? And they say, yeah, of course, sports. I say, great, accept it. Don't fight it. Accept
That's a
it all.
reality.
Yeah, accept it, because whenever you're trying to resist it, you're going to be fighting yourself within the moment. But if you can accept it, you can ask yourself, can I handle it? If you have a plan for how you're going to bounce back, what you're going to do is you're going to free your mind from trying to manage that threat, and you're just going to focus on execution. And that starts to relieve a lot of that pressure.
I love that. You basically are, speaking my language as well, with really what's your focus? Are you focusing on all the what ifs that might happen, that you might freeze, that you might, lose in overtime? Like what's your focus? And one thing that comes to mind, I'm sorry, I'm a lot about hockey, but it doesn't matter what sports it is. I remember that Jack Hughes in the USA, everybody remembers that game. And when
Well,
they
I'm a
played,
Canadian. I'm trying to
I
forget.
know you're a Canadian, you're trying to forget that.
But that is one of the
Sorry,
best games I've
Jason.
seen. No, 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 no. That is a phenomenal
Sorry
team
for
that,
your loss.
yeah, I'm sure you are.
So, but Jack Hughes did say that he was, I think it was the night before, he was, trying to fall asleep, and him and Quinn fell asleep really late or whatever. They couldn't sleep or something. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm imagining the winning
Mm.
goal in overtime. And that's exactly what happened. I don't believe that's by accident. I do believe that, then you mentioned earlier, like, there's a lot of what ifs. He wasn't focused. I hate to say that he's a phenomenal hockey player, but he wasn't focused on what if I freeze in a win, right? What if I don't make the winning goal? Like, he was focused on what he wanted. And it
Mhm.
might sound so simple, Jason, but there's such power, and it's more about do it. Do it when it matters, do it when it doesn't matter, do it and it becomes a habit of just shifting that mindset and the perspective that you look at every situation, and what you really focus on, you're going to experience more than you will not. I'm not saying that every single time I focus on having the winning goal, you're going to get it every time. But I would say that you just increase your chances. It changes how you feel, right? You're not sitting there palm sweating. And quite frankly, even if you're nervous, I think that's a good thing. Would you say that that's a good thing? What's your thoughts on that when someone's
To have
nervous?
nerves, yeah, no, nerves is great. Okay, as I said, nothing is good or bad until you give it meaning. So when an athlete tells you
Yeah,
I'm nervous, well, great,
that's
awesome, let's use
amazing.
it,
You're
right?
pushing yourself out of your comfort zone,
Yeah,
maybe.
good. Nervous, great. That your body's getting ready for activation, and yeah, I mean, you hit it on the nail, right? Where I think too many people are far more loyal to their past than they are to their future, and so even though consciously we think we want something, subconsciously we're often trying to avoid things that we don't want to re-experience. And so for Hughes to just be fully immersed in the possibility of a future that I want for myself, created the internal state that allowed him to perform with a certain level of freedom, which unfortunately for Canada led to the game-winning goal. But I think it speaks to, the moment you like the future is a complete blank slate, except for the fact that many of us try to drag our dead, past bodies into it. But the
Of
future is a
course.
complete blank canvas. Okay.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
think about the possibilities, and from there get excited about the unknown. That's where all the best opportunities are for you still.
Absolutely. And the anticipation that something great is coming. I love that you mentioned people are often more loyal to their past. That is amazing. Let that sit in for a second. That was amazing. A lot of things that what you're saying makes total sense. Love this. So what's your favorite sport well, besides hockey, but what is your favorite sport? Is it hockey? Is it tennis? Is it
So
soccer?
yes,
Soccer.
I grew up playing soccer. I grew up playing all sports. Actually, I'm a huge sports guy, but soccer is where I kind of found my pathway, and that took me to college and beyond. But I'm just a big sports guy overall. As I mentioned, from Toronto, so growing up, hockey was a huge thing. And yeah, as I mentioned, I was unfortunately became a Leafs fan, and no one protected me from that. But no, just a big sports guy. I work with athletes in all different types of sports, including tennis. But yeah, I mean, I just love sports overall. I just love the competitiveness of it. I love the life lessons that we get from it. Just everything about it. I just huge sports guy.
That's amazing. So where can people find you, Jason? And before you answer that, actually, one question I want to ask you, who's your ideal customer that you work with? I'm sure you work with many across the board, young and old. I don't mean old, but older. But who is your ideal customer?
Performers who know, I think that the main thing that I see with the athletes or the entrepreneurs that I work with are they know they have more to give, but they can't seem to figure out how to get past some of these invisible blocks that they don't see, some of their blind spots. And so I really help in terms of those blind spots. But the
Awesome.
majority of those would be, from entrepreneurs or athletes who are at the high levels, from Olympians to collegiate athletes, all the way down to very competitive junior athletes. And so those are the majority of the people that I work with.
Very cool. Do you do in person or do you also do like Zoom or video sessions?
Yeah, I do. Well, most of my athletes are all over the world. I literally have athletes in every continent, so it's all
Okay.
done mostly virtually. But I do workshops, and I work with some of the Olympians here in Toronto, and I'm going to be doing a TEDx talk soon, which I'm super excited about. So
Amazing.
I won't be able to hide on a Zoom camera anymore. I'll have to be in front of people, and I'm so excited about that. And I'll have to pick your brain on some of these tips that you have for these keynote speakers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all transferable, but yes, I'd love to connect later on that. I'm actually also looking to do a TEDx this year as well, in Italy. So we'll see. But yes, I think it's amazing the work that you're doing. It's a very, there's a lot of athletes out there that the best athletes, the best performers, the best entrepreneurs, the best humans, I don't care what you do, has have coaches. I mean, I've had coaches in different areas of life, whether it was business on something that I was working on or anything. It's all about growth and who you are today doesn't mean that you can be the best on top of your game. I don't think that anyone is too on top. I've said this before. They're not too much on top of their game that they don't need a coach. I think it just enhances you to be that much better. And I love that. I love what you do. And and the work that you're doing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm a coach, but I have coaches myself. And I think, we always talk about reaching your potential, but I like to think that we're never going to reach it because that means there's always opportunity for growth, right?
Well, yes, it's endless. It's endless opportunities. Love it. So where can people find you if they want to work with you, Jason?
Yeah, so the majority of the people find me on Instagram. So Coach J, or the handle is Jason A. Sousa. And I also have a website, which is getyourmentaledge.com, for a lot of my athletes and some of my methodology there as well.
It'll be on the screen so people can definitely, is there any last words you'd like to say of any wisdom, if somebody might be listening in, that comes to mind?
Last words of wisdom. I think there's one quote from Carl Jung that really changed a lot of things for me. And that is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that for me really, really changed things for me. Start to explore some of these subconscious patterns that are dictating your life. Otherwise, you'll think that it's just fate.
I love that. We're definitely going to have that quote pop up here. That's cool. I like it a lot. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Maybe we'll have another time to connect on this Make Things Happen podcast and see what you're up to maybe a year from now, maybe after your TEDx.
It would be an absolute pleasure. I'd love to be back on the show.
Thank you. That is all for the Make Things Happen podcast. Make sure that you subscribe below and make sure that you follow Jason because he has amazing content, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a parent or an entrepreneur, or just someone looking to get some good motivation on how the brain works and how it affects your performance. Make sure to check it out.